why are you expanding your business when you're so successful here? And I told my friend that I actually failed.
There is this toxic positivity, where we kind of trying to reframe everything into positivity while it's not really positive. So what do you think about it?
And you never talk about it again, because to bring it up over and over is going to ruin a marriage.
Before leaving my marriage, it took me so long to finally get the courage, know.
If you have nothing nice to say, please don't say it.
It's a thing with my childhood where I was always praised as a child.
Yeah.
So now I feel like I can't make mistakes.
Yes.
And I always want the world to see me as perfect.
Yeah.
And it stopped me from being vulnerable with people.
But wake up and look at something else. I'm giving you the opportunity now. Just look for it.
Hi, this is Tanya Gromenko here, and this is my podcast, Seasons of Courage, where I interview inspiring people, uncover their life journeys, and hopefully this can inspire you guys to take a courageous step in your own life. And today with me, I have Sunita Gill, my friend, an entrepreneur, and a person who I always look up to, and she inspires me in so many ways. Welcome, Sunita.
Thank you, Tanya. Thank you for having me. And I'm so happy to see you on this journey, and love supporting you.
Thank you. And I was actually reflecting on your life journey, and I thought that we could talk about a very important topic, which is letting go.
Right.
And I feel like in my own life, this topic came up a lot, especially during the recent years.
Right.
And I've been learning how to let go. And I feel like it is so hard to actually, let go of control, because I think, in my opinion, letting go always involves, releasing control, trusting the process, allowing ourselves to grieve, and probably you understand me as well, because you are an entrepreneur, and as entrepreneurs, it is so hard to let go of control, because we want to be in control. Yeah. What
I think that's so interesting, right? So about 3 years ago, I felt like I had a burnout, and I needed to find a way to let go. But being the A type of entrepreneur, that was very difficult, because we want to deliver certain results based on our standards to whoever we are with, from a business or professional personal or professional relationship. And now, so I went to a friend and I said that I work with my husband very closely, and I said that I want to let go, but I'm not sure if he can live up to my standards, although we are a couple and we stand for the same values, but he has different guidelines of perfection that I have, right? Just like every individual has. Very interestingly, I told her that I felt like he wasn't doing enough, and I felt like instead of letting go and giving him the opportunity, I started doing the name blame. Mm-hmm. And she said, let's do a test on my personality. And this was a test that I hadn't done for a very long time. I remember doing it when I was much younger. So she got me to do the Gallup test.
Oh, I've heard about it.
Yes. So in the test, the results of the test was that I am a perfectionist, and it's okay not to let go.
Oh, it's okay not to let go.
It's okay not to let go. So you let go what you are comfortable to let go, but you can always still hold on to where it's necessary. So it's very, very catch-22 about how they say this, right? So I realized that, and you do not blame the person who cannot live up to what you're letting go for. So I was blaming my husband, saying that if I give you a task to do, you cannot perform the way that I'm doing. Mm-hmm. And I was getting more frustrated that by letting go, I was giving myself more work. But when I reflected on myself and say, I am the perfectionist, I'm the one who's not letting go fully and yet taking the responsibility of blaming someone else. So I changed my whole narrative, and I said, I'm not letting go. I'm letting go of specific tasks where I can still be brought it back to me, and then I can still see something till the end and to my expectations, or I let go with telling him very clearly, just follow A, B, C, D, because that's the way I do it. So I didn't fully let go. I let go with instruction. Mm-hmm. That really helped me.
Yeah, maybe a lot of entrepreneurs can relate. Yeah.
Yeah, so you let go with instruction, you delegate with instruction, you tell whoever you want to let go to, this is exactly the way I like it done. Please don't do it any other way, because if I'm letting go to you, I want the result back this way. It's just like a ChatGPT prompt. You tell GPT what you want in your answer for a specific question. Let go mindfully and let go with instruction was how I've led myself, and it's been so amazing. And we have the best relationship now because he knows exactly what I want. I know what I am able to let go with getting the final answer that I want in the end.
That's important. Yeah. The power of communication.
Exactly.
Right?
And the Strength Finder really helped me identify that. So I think sometimes we just need to learn about our personality and who we are before we look at the other person or saying we let go and be unhappy about something. It's actually reflection of ourselves.
Exactly. And I was really looking forward to this podcast because I wanted to learn more about you, because to me you have always been this strong woman who is very successful. By the way, I think we should introduce you properly. So you are basically a real estate agent. You are selling luxury real estate or renting luxury real estate in Singapore. You have built your business from ground up with your husband, right? Is there anything else we should add to that?
I'm a mom. That's the biggest job.
Right. 2 kids as well. So
I have 2 daughters, 9 and 11.
Okay.
Yes. I majored in mass communication. I had a passion in advertising, PR, journalism. I did that for a few years, but then I realized that, like I was shared my story with you, in my late 20s, I wanted to buy a property from myself. And I went out to the market. I was this young, doe-eyed girl. I basically wanted to work with someone who could help me with my journey in property until I became a mom and a wife, and, to progress from a 1-bedder probably that I can afford to a 3 or 4-bedder. And I realized that I wasn't getting answers from people who would follow me through my journey. Everybody was selling transactionally based on the supply or the inventory they had. And I started really liking what I was listening to, learning about the market. Unfortunately, my parents fell ill, and I took that opportunity to leave my corporate job so that I could spend time with them and go into the real estate industry to learn it, to perfect it. And I did it for about 8 years before I met my husband. And he moved from Canada to join me because he was always interested in the construction industry as well. So we've built a very humble, small company, Singapore Luxury Homes, where our values and purpose is really to provide a great value and experience for everybody that we work with. Integrity and honesty of whether or not they should actually go into a particular purchase is what guides us. We believe that by being totally brutally honest to an investment, even though it might not be happy for the person receiving that answer, is how we lead our business. We've had 80% of our business is a referral business because people who have interacted with us feel that they like that experience of not being pushed to purchase, but rather be very openly given the knowledge of what they're going into. So I feel really, really blessed that I meet so many people of different walks of life who have helped me in so many ways, even though when they didn't become my client, they've helped me, I've met doctors who have given me medical advice. I've met educators who have guided me in my children's education journey. I've met you when I was looking for a virtual assistant for my business when I was burnt out and I needed to delegate the smaller tasks. And I am really, really grateful that using a job, it could help me grow so much in the ways that I wanted to. Yeah.
Okay, that's great. So as a strong woman on the outside, everything. I mean, you have achieved a lot, but
Yeah.
like, what during this journey, what things did you have to let go of?
Yeah.
Like whether it is within yourself, about how you see yourself or the world or success.
Yeah.
I know that you have been through different challenging journeys in your life, like
Right.
losing your mom and also divorce, right, with your ex-husband, building a business, maybe definitely failing at some points, maybe. So what changed during this journey? What did you have to let go of?
I think one fundamental is if I lost everything tomorrow, I wouldn't feel bad because I lead my daily life with gratefulness. Gratitude and gratefulness daily is what guides me. When I lose deals daily, what comforts me is a saying which a friend said to me once. We were working on a very big deal for a client to buy a couple of floors in a building, and he was a private banker who was working on the banking instrument for the client. And he was going to get potentially a very big commission, and I was going to get a very big commission. And after a few months, we lost the deal altogether when the client decided not to go ahead. He said something to me when I told him that, yeah, we lost the deal that we've been working on. He said, "It's okay, Sunita. Men's rejection is God's protection." Something would have gone wrong later on, which was difficult for us to navigate on a professional way. We would have been affected maybe professionally, personally. It was a very difficult transaction which we were trying to put together. So, every day we all get rejections. It could be something as small as not finding a parking lot. I always tell myself, it's okay, I was not meant to park there because maybe some paint will spill on my car. Or I always guide myself with gratefulness of how the negative is potentially a positive. So from a divorce to losing my mother to deals that have gone wrong, I always try to find the positive sides of that. The divorce was necessary to teach me so many lessons in life, to teach me about how to deal with a person in a relationship, to teach me that it's okay to waste 7 years of my life and still rebuild my life. It's okay to not be with someone emotionally but still be friends with the person. We are still friends now.
Oh, really? Wow.
Yeah. And just a few days ago, I was talking to him in front, of course, on the phone, in front of my current husband to get advice in a particular area that I know he could share with me.
How did you guys make it work?
How did we make it work is that the day we both had a conversation and realized we may not be lovers, but we can be friends. Yeah, and to respectfully respect the boundaries.
But how did you let go of all the probably, I don't know, blame or because there was a reason you guys broke up and
Yes.
separated, right?
It took 2 years or so
Okay.
to completely not have communication. And then I think when we moved on with our respective partners after that, we kind of said, okay, that was a part of our lives and we were ready to move on with not letting that burden carry us forward.
Okay.
Yeah, we both kind of very organically transitioned as in we are ready to talk as humans now.
Okay.
You
And
know.
how did you find the courage to leave your corporate job at that time, start a business, leave your ex-husband, right?
Yeah.
How did it happen for you after 7 years of marriage, after working in media for so long,
Yeah.
right?
I think courage comes with priorities, being the eldest child, when my parents got ill and my mother needed me because my father was very ill, I think I was very lucky to be brought up with the right values that family comes first before everything else. And that my mother showed me that you can be there for us and everything will still work out. Of course, financially it was tighter because a corporate job pays you a certain amount every month. And But I also was led by two very powerful entrepreneurs in my life, my parents, who were very successful business entrepreneurs, which said that you can not lead a corporate job and do a new job in sales where commissions can actually be enough to guide you through a few months. So I focused my attention on the big deal so that I would get that commission to be able to be with my parents for the few months. And I got the courage from them because of their lives and what I saw growing up. So that was on the parent front of getting that courage. About leaving the husband, I think everybody gives you courage. I'm very lucky that my ex-mother-in-law gave me the courage as a woman.
To leave
leave
him.
her son.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and I think
That's
God
unusual.
always places the right people in your life to give you the courage, and you just need to seek it. I've always treated my in-laws or elderly with utmost respect and like as though they are my friends, because I think we spend a lot of time with them. So rather than just being nice to your friend, be nice to people at home, you know. So I became very close with her, and I was very honest with her, woman to woman, that this was happening, and not to blame her son or to blame me or blame anything. And I keep seeking her guidance about what should I do, Mom, what should I do? Because although she was a mother, she was also a woman, you know. And she told me one thing, which I'll never forget. She was like, either you forgive him and you never talk about it again, because to bring it up over and over is going to ruin a marriage. Or you walk away and never look back. And I will support you when you walk away. And I walked away. And she closed the doors and told me, keep walking and don't look back.
Wow.
Yeah, so that was, that gave me the courage, you know.
She gave you courage to...
So much courage. And I'm very grateful to seek the courage. I was not 100% sure if I tell her what her son, what I was feeling with her son, whether I would get the courage. But I told myself that I'm going to try to get the courage from wherever I could. It could not have been her. It could have been a book, or it could have been a message. But I think we should just try to seek the courage and not keep it within us. You know, you never know where you get the answers.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's sometimes so hard to make a decision as well.
Correct.
Even in my marriage as well. Before leaving my marriage, it took me so long to finally get the courage, you know, to just decide.
Yes.
It's so hard, and like you said, it should not necessarily be a person who gives you courage, but it can be a book, through the books,
Anything.
through social media.
I think the universe gives us messages in ways we just need to process that message is for us. You know, to find the truth in what we see, because if we believe that we are highly favored and protected, we will constantly be drawn to the right messages.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I feel it always comes down to whether we see universe as a friendly place or as an unfriendly place, right?
Yes.
If it's a friendly place, then it will all work out for us.
Absolutely.
And you are guided, right?
Yes. Yeah.
And you mentioned, which I completely relate to as well, is you mentioned that you reframe each experience and you always lead with gratitude, focusing on what this particular experience can give you, right? But I do the same, but sometimes I feel that I kind of numb my negative feelings and I can't really meet the grief or the negative emotions. And you know this phrase, some people say there is this toxic positivity, you know, where we kind of trying to reframe everything into positivity while it's not really positive. So what do you think about it?
I think you should allow yourself to acknowledge what's negative.
Okay.
I don't think we should keep masking everything. It's okay to be sad. It's okay to cry. It's okay to be angry. But I think what's more important is how you give yourself the space to do it and then get up and move on. So I worked with a particular gentleman who is like a senior in my real estate industry. And he told me once, we all will lose deal in sales. Take your time, go back, be upset about losing the deal. Tomorrow, get up and be positive again. Because if you're going to carry this energy over to tomorrow, you're going to repel everything that's coming your way tomorrow.
Yeah.
But I think we should always give ourselves the space to feel.
But it should be a limited time, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Mindfully limited. And it will keep coming back. So it depends on what it means to you, right? Is it, I want to grieve for 1 month, I want to go on a solo trip for 1 month, but then I'm going to wake the hell up and move on.
Yeah.
Or I can't get over this, I'm going to take 6 months. But I think you should be mindfully ready to say when this will stop. Because we all control our own minds, right?
Yeah.
It's hard. And I think it takes a lot of consciousness. For me, accountability partners have really helped. Where
How does
I
it
have
work?
gone to a friend who I think can resonate with me. Not necessarily always my husband. My husband is my best friend, but there's certain things that he may not get it. Like this year I started my perimenopause. He's never going to get it. To him, it's just another thing a woman goes through, although he's very good to read about it, to learn about it. But I actually went to other girlfriends who've been through it to be my source of, hey, I went through a brain fog today, and for her to say, it's okay, babe. It's for 2 hours. Tomorrow you'll be fine. You know? So find different accountability partners who resonate with that journey in your life. That's why I think it's great that there is the Alcoholics Anonymous, or, you know, women who've been through bad marriages, or parents dealing with difficult children. I think we must be open to find those avenues, and that gives us courage in those circles. And I think sometimes we are very embarrassed to share what we're going through with people who think of us as a certain way. They have a certain ideology of you. You are successful and nothing bad can happen to you. And it's fine that they think that way, and you can still be vulnerable to somebody who thinks that nothing bad has ever happened to you. But we all go through life. Life comes with ups and downs. It's how we get up and move on.
Yeah, and you know, I can relate to that so much, because I found that for me, it's not necessarily like that the people are having a certain image of me, but I want to project a certain image into the world, and I want the world to see me as successful. Like, you know, maybe it's a thing with my childhood where I was always praised as a child. So now I feel like I can't make mistakes, and I always want the world to see me as perfect. And it stopped me from being vulnerable with people, and I felt that I'm always projecting a certain image of a happy person. And when I finally started to open up about my struggles, I realized that, wow, I got so much support, and a lot of women are going through the same thing.
And I think what's important is it's okay to not get support as well, because not everybody will be your cheerleader when you tell them how vulnerable you are. Some people may disconnect and say, I don't want to be with that person who I thought was who she is, and now no more, and that's okay.
Is it like negativity or what?
No, some people just always want to be with people who they think are a certain success, and the moment that success shows as not that, they walk away. And that's okay. Those are not your people.
Exactly.
And I remember Jay Shetty said in one of his podcasts, you are not who you think you are. You are who you think the world think you are. And that's so impactful that we keep going out there to put up who we want the world to think we are. And it's okay to be who you are. And the day I've learned to let go about who that person think I am, and I'm still on that journey, has liberated me so much. I feel like I can just be.
Be yourself.
Be. Without worrying about
people's approval or validation.
Validation,
right?
approval. Like Michelle Obama said something to her daughters, which I learned as a very important statement to teach my daughters. It's okay if nobody in the world loves you or like you. You only need to be loved or liked in your own home. That's it.
By your family, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
either family, spouse, child. That's the only place you need to be loved or liked. It's okay if nobody else in the world loves you or likes you. And that's enough.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, and I told my daughters that when, they are going out and they are pre-teens and puberty is hitting girls, and they need that source of courage as well. And no mom who is successful or confident is going to be able to see them through their eyes. And they're constantly wanting to seek approvals of their friends, of their school, of everything else. And I told my daughter, you are the leader of you. You do not need to be the leader of a friend group or anyway, as long as you lead yourself well, that's really
and
something
the right
that,
people will be attracted to you, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And it's impossible to be liked by everyone. We are so afraid to be disliked, And but what I've always admired in you, Sunita, is that you are always positive no matter what's going on behind the scenes.
I don't tell everybody the negative part.
Yeah. But how do you manage it? Like, do you mean that you always process these negative emotions in private or with your closest friends?
I think I do talk about my negative emotions. Again, like I said, I find the right person to speak about it to. If it's how I feel physically, I have a girlfriend who is a health coach and a very beautiful girl who doesn't name and shame women's bodies because of we put on 2 kilos because we felt like eating extra Christmas dessert or I'm having wrinkles as I'm in my 40s. That's on so I talk to her when I'm feeling bad about my body. And I talked to another friend who runs a very successful business as a business coach when my business is going wrong. So I think I have started to learn to talk to the relevant person who understands that part of my negativity. Sometimes you can't find that person, and it's okay. Then I look for answers through podcasts that I listen to, through, I just even mindfully scroll on Instagram and see what connects to me. I always feel I do not have time to be depressed because I have 2 girls looking at me. I do not have that luxury. I have nothing against people who, and I feel for people who have a medical condition of depression. But I feel that when you are a mom and a business person and you just are running all day long, you have to find ways to just be positive. My gratitude journal that I've started in the last 6 months have been so amazing for me. Because of my life being so busy all day, I honestly couldn't afford to take time off 15 minutes to meditate or something. I needed 5 minutes. That's it. As much as I have my morning coffee is the time I have to write it out. And I love it now that over the 6 months, I've been writing things and then coming back to it and circling that things that I wanted have been coming through. So for me, it's been like a challenge. Every day I look back, this came through, this came through, this came through, and it's just so liberating. And I'm so, so grateful. And sometimes it's a very small thing. Like, I want to speak to my children mindfully today. I want to have a meal with them and not pick up my phone. It's just
small things, but they matter a lot.
Very small, but it means a lot. Like when one day I went for a walk, I have daily evening walks with my children after dinner, and I tell them that I want you to tell me 5 things that you're happy about today, but also tell me 5 things that you were not happy about. And they tell you the darnest things. My friend didn't give me the cookie she was eating. I'm not happy. But also the other thing that I'm happy about is that, today my teacher said that I did well in my spelling. It could be anything, right? And I find that they pick up the smallest things to be grateful about. Why do we need the big things only all the time? Why do we need the big successes only? The most small successes, it adds up to be, it fills your jar, right?
Yeah.
And there was one time when my daughter said, Mommy, I'm so happy that you don't take your phone with you when we go for a walk. And,
Wow, that's
that
big.
was the happiest thing I heard the year because it made a difference.
Wow.
Yeah, so I think we have to stop segmentizing small and big things and just classifying it all into the good things and keep adding on to that grateful jar. Yeah.
Okay, thank you for sharing. And I'm wondering, like, after building a successful business, I know you are still on your journey,
Yes.
but like building a successful business, raising kids, and recently losing your mom, going through divorce and then remarrying again. Like, how does success look like for you right now?
Success is a lifelong learning journey.
But do you find yourself successful now? Do you find yourself happy? Or is it something that you always want to achieve?
I think like what I said earlier was that if I lose everything today and don't have anything, I have my human capital. My capital of all the experiences that I've been through. And I think that's priceless. So I think I've shared with you that I'm on a journey to expand my business into the UAE and Dubai. It's a very new territory for me, and I come, of course, with a lot of fears, uncertainties. Just 2 weeks ago, I was at Marina Bay Sands I had a staycation, and I was at the infinity pool with my daughters, and I looked at my daughter and I said, Mommy knows every building here, or every area, but when we go to Dubai, Mommy doesn't know a lot of things. So my daughters will move and expand first while we transition our business between Singapore and Dubai. But it's a whole new growth journey, right? And I said, what do you feel about that? That Mommy won't know all these things. And she's looked at me and she said, but you've learned. You're smart. You can find out. Then I said, why did you say that? Because that's what you do even here. You don't know exactly everything, but you always find out. So for me, what is success to me is the ability to keep learning. Really, to not say that you have ever arrived. I'm never successful. I'm never at my peak of success. I'm always getting to be more successful every day with everything that's going on. I feel successful today that I'm on your podcast. So every day I'm feeling different levels of success in different ways. There's no peak.
Wow, that's amazing. And you are basically just enjoying the journey, learning
I'm
throughout the
enjoying
journey.
the journey so much, from learning new business and processes for my new business, from the challenges that are coming my way. I feel that it's successful not to know something as well. Success to me means I don't know this and I'm going to learn it. That's also the fact that I'm given the chance to know that I don't know is successful to me. So it doesn't have a definition to me. And I think I was sharing with you as well. A friend said to me recently, why are you expanding your business when you're so successful here? And I told my friend that I actually failed. And she said, she was very surprised. She said, I was like, I have tried and tried and tried and failed. And she's like, oh. See, in certain businesses or things we do, we feel that there is a peak of where we want to get to. But sometimes it's the last part of the peak which we just cannot climb anymore. There's just something.
There is a ceiling, right?
You can't get to the ceiling because there's some layer just above the ceiling, which nothing you have been doing for 3 years, 5 years, 10 years lets you penetrate that ceiling. And it's a message from the universe. The soil on this grass is done. Start looking for a different patch to grow your flowers.
It takes a lot of courage to actually do that as well.
Yes. Stop planting here. The fertilizer is not going through anymore.
Although it's your familiar
It is familiar,
area.
but
Yeah.
wake up and look at something else. I'm giving you the opportunity now, just look for it. And I found that thankfully last year with an opportunity in the UAE. And I decided to take it and to grow my new flowers on a new area. And, I may bloom, I may not bloom, but I'm going to learn how to become a seed to a flower. And I'm looking forward to that journey.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
I'm also curious to talk about how you manage your business and maybe what beliefs did you let go of during, like to make your business as successful as it is right now. I know I'm always been admiring you, how you treat your clients, how you always go the extra mile, how you have this integrity, that you also mentioned about, and how you are not afraid to lose the deals, even if it means losing money for you.
Yeah.
How you always, arrange these dinners, lunches for your clients, for your friends, without asking anything back, and cheering your friends up, like what drives you? And what maybe were there some beliefs that you had to let go of in this process?
I think the belief to expect what you're giving, that you're not going to get back what you give.
So like give without expectations.
Give without expectation. Many years ago, when I started giving and had the capacity to give, whether a financial present or presence, I stopped. I did expect. I was there for my girlfriend. Why isn't she picking up my call? I gave you a Christmas gift. Why aren't you saying thank you? And it bothered me. And then I started, and my husband helped me in this journey of not expecting anything. And I think the more and more and more reminders to stop expecting was the best thing that I've done for myself, to not expect anything and to give yourself wholeheartedly. So as you know, I do a lot of gatherings yearly, at least 2 to 3 times with women entrepreneurs, friends. And I also invite my clients who I spend a lot of time with in my life, who when I'm looking at a property with them and we sit in the car and we drive, we talk about everything, family, children, life, journey, everything, because it's not only about the property that we're talking about. And what I realize is that all these people are fueling me actually. I am refueling my battery and being charged by their wisdom. I'm being charged by their love. I'm being charged by friends who care, who make a difference. And so actually, I lost my mom 3 months ago in September. And I had already sent out Diwali, save the date for a get together. And I had to cancel that because out of respect for my mom. But yet I felt that I needed to do another lunch to fuel my battery. My battery was on a low, emotionally, physically, mentally. And some people actually said to me, don't you think it's disrespectful to hold a party with 25 women when your mom just passed away? You should be grieving. And I said, part of my grieving recovery is being fueled by the women who are going to be sitting at that table. So everything can look differently for you without having the need to explain it to anybody. So when I had my lunch, the seat at the table last week, which you attended, actually I went back that weekend and I was able to be a better mom, a better wife, a better friend, because the 25 women charged my battery in ways that I cannot explain.
Wow, amazing. So that's basically what you get from this,
Yes,
right?
I get fueled. It's like charging your phone from 0 to 100. I felt charged emotionally, mentally, in so many ways that I felt the power of the universe coming together and holding me up and saying, you can do this.
Wow,
Yeah.
amazing.
So that gave me a lot of courage. And I love the word courage because I think the word courage, brave, we all are children who are very scared in life. We when we really reflect about life, failing, success, it all comes down to be how brave am I to walk into a room. I was invited for a lunch with a minister 5 years ago. It was a very random lunch invite I got saying that we want to meet people on the ground to talk about life and what they're going through. And I asked them, what's the guest list of who else is attending? Everybody on that table of 12 were CEOs running multinational companies.
Oh.
I was just a property broker. And I was very nervous. I was very, I didn't have the courage to go for it. I told my husband that, maybe I should write to them and say no. And he said, no, go for it. Be silent if you don't have something to say, but go for it. What's the worst that's going to happen? Nothing, right? So I went for it. But I realized that I spoke the most at the lunch.
Wow.
Because my job gave me the courage and to just make friends, be myself, talk about so many different things. Everybody else at the table were all boxed into only their profession. They were only in real estate or only in finance or only in tech. Because I had the privilege to do the job that I was doing where I met people for all walks of life, every one of my clients was actually giving me that courage to speak at that table that day.
Wow.
Yeah, so it was something I never forget, that I went to a table where I was actually the smallest job in terms of a title, but I had the biggest voice in the right way to have a constructive conversation, and I felt so empowered.
Amazing. So it's not about the job title. It's
No,
about
it's
the
not.
experiences,
Yeah.
what you can share, how you can inspire people.
Yeah, and it's about being brave to share.
Yeah.
That nothing you can say is wrong. It's okay to be wrong.
Yeah.
There's no right answer.
Exactly.
It's about the courage to give your opinion, to take things constructively, to learn, to grow, and to be grateful for whatever. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing. Yeah, that's important.
Yeah.
And I also know that your relationships with your mom and your parents, they really influenced you a lot.
Yeah.
Can you share a bit more on that? Like maybe there is also something that your mom helped you to let go of
Yeah.
or embrace?
So I think my mom had a stroke 15 years ago. And that time was the most difficult because she lost her voice. And she could not speak to me ever again.
Oh, really? I
Yeah.
didn't know that.
Yeah, so 15 years ago, she lost her voice through her stroke. And when that happened, you just want to talk to your mom one last time. She was my best friend and everything. But I realized what I learned from mom was that you didn't need to talk to communicate. I would still talk to her like I talk to her normally. I would tell Mom, I'm going to work today and I'm trying to close this really important deal. And she would put her hand on my hand. And that was the communication that I needed. So I learned that not all words are needed sometimes. You can talk in ways that are not verbal. And that you can be there for people in ways you don't need to always have something to say.
You can just be present with
You can
someone.
be present. You can be with a partner, a friend, or anything, and just be there to support that person by your presence, by resharing their business. Even if you cannot afford their business, you can speak about them in rooms you are in that they are not in. My mother used to do that a lot. My mother believed that relationships matter more than materials. I always share with my friends, and even recently when she was about to pass away, that mommy used to, her friends came to visit me when she passed away, and she said, your mom, the moment we said something looks good on her, she'll just take it off and give it to us. If it's a earring, it's a necklace. Your mom had no value on anything materialistic. All she valued was to see a smile on our face. And I thought, wow, that's so... I don't know how much I'll give away my Chanel earrings to my girlfriend who said she likes
It's so
it.
different, yeah.
It takes a lot to give away a material thing that, you potentially saved for a love or something like that. But my mom really found that the other person's happiness, it was something she could buy again. And there was one time when her friend really liked her lipstick, and I remember she brought me to Estee Lauder to buy that lipstick, to go all the way to her friend's house to give her that lipstick. And her friend was just like, who are you? How are you so open and, giving? And I really, really want to learn that from my mom, and that values that, to treasure relationships more than material. And I'm on that journey.
I feel it's so needed right now in this world, where we mostly focus on ourselves, how much we earn, what we do, how the world sees us, right?
Correct. I think to be mindful about every relationship that you have. If you love a friend, tell her you love her. If you think your friend is doing well, tell her she's doing well. She could be having the worst day, but that one message of, I really like how your hair looked today, could just change her trajectory.
I really love that.
I really like the shoe that you were wearing when we do mindful Instagram scrolling, but you look at something you like about that person, or just say it. Stop
suppressing it.
People
right?
have this thing that I don't want to keep saying things, but I think it's okay to keep saying something small, something that makes a difference, something positive. Of course, I'm a big believer. If you have nothing nice to say, please don't say it. Don't hurt a person, because the world really needs kindness, and we don't know what journey everybody is going through.
And it's so transformative to also be able to be happy for other people. I feel
that's a huge
that really changed
thing.
my life. Sometimes I feel like I'm going through such a difficult period in my life right now, with ending my marriage and some struggles in my business previously. And I realized that at that point of time, a lot of my friends, they are very happy. They
having
are going
the best holidays,
or maybe they are expecting kids, getting married, And I feel like I feel so uplifted when I actually take time to message them and say how happy I am for them.
And that's amazing. I think, Tanya, not many people are able to do that.
I was not able to do it before. I was always concentrating on myself and my life, and I was like, oh, my life is great. I'm going through these great things. While my friends were probably going through their own difficult periods,
That's something I've really been trying to learn, how to be genuinely happy for someone or a situation without feeling any feelings of jealousy or envy, and how that happiness actually will bring back a lot more for me as well. And I'm starting to learn that. Still, I'm on a journey, but I'm starting with the phrase with the more you give, the more you get. And I keep telling my daughters that, really, keep giving and you will get, and the universe will return that to you. Just have that as a fundamental. The more you give, the more you get. Be it your time, your whatever you can afford to give, and your love and your support and your kindness. Just keep giving, and it's okay not to receive.
And I also personally let go of the belief that we are separated as people, and life is a competition. What did I achieve? What did you achieve? Right now, I feel like we are all the same. We are all humans. We are all related. And I feel like I've been part of different women's groups and circles during this year, and I realized that when ladies who are so put together, so successful, they started sharing about their life, I was shocked that all of them were going through difficult things.
Of course, because what does success mean to you? I know a friend whose success means to her that she has a Bentley and a Rolls Royce and a whatever, Hermes handbags and everything. But unfortunately, she was abused in a relationship that was giving her all this. And to me, then you can have everything materialistic, but I really have a good relationship with my husband. So what's success? What does that mean to you? That's why when you asked me earlier, are you successful? I think I'm always on an ongoing success journey. You know, what success means to someone and what success means to you can be completely different. And I think that we all measure it differently. We all are in a different stage in our life. We are all beings. And I like to go to the temple with my children. Because I realize that when we go to a place of worship, we're all just surrendering as humans. Nobody is seeing your success level, who you are, what you do, how much money you have. God is above, for me, I'm partially spiritual. God is above everything else. There's always something bigger and better, you know, especially even finance, money, right? If you own a penthouse, there's a guy who owns a bigger penthouse.
Yeah.
And there's always something bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. What's the peak?
Yeah.
There's no end.
But it will not necessarily make you happy as well.
Yes.
And
I've seen I'm in the industry of luxury homes where I meet billionaires who are sitting in a chair in the corner of his house because his children and grandchildren and everyone else are so busy and don't talk to him, and his maidservant is the only person he speaks to.
That's very sad. Yeah.
He has everything. My children drive past his house and say, "Oh, such a big house." I was like, "Yeah, but there's no..." And he tells me, he's like, "Sunita, I don't hear laughter anymore."
Yeah.
You know? And it's really sad that what is everything to you?
Yeah.
You know, it's so hard to explain.
Yeah, and I think we should let go of the belief that, you know, it's we should judge by the cover because we never know what's going on inside, and we should be kinder to other people because
100%.
For sure they're going through their different things.
Yes.
I think it's even more relevant in the social media era where it's all so polished and you feel like
everything
your life
looks
is
like
miserable.
they have it all.
Yeah.
Actually, they don't have it all.
Exactly. So
I think nobody has it all. They want to show that they have it all. And it's actually quite sad to keep showing like you have it all. I think I've started really appreciating that privacy is priceless as well. I would love to share things that can benefit people in terms of the values, the courage, the hard work, and that it's okay at any stage in your life to fail and get up and do it again. It's really okay. But in terms of the privacy of success, I think I don't really share too much of my success, and it's okay not to share. And I'm actually excluded from tables because they don't think I have a certain level of success, and I'm okay as well. I don't need to prove it.
Yeah, I completely relate. It's better I share something that can inspire people and give them courage instead of just showing the life, the lifestyle. Or I think that's very powerful.
Yeah.
So what would you say to people who need some courage to maybe make an important decision in their lives, start a new job, transition into something new? What would you advise?
Just do it.
Without looking back.
Just do it. Don't look back. Always ask yourself, what's the worst that can happen? I think I shared this story with you about my mom and when my father lost everything and that the bank was going to repossess the house, and she had the cars, the jewelry, the clothes, the everything. And when she had to move forward, and she said, what's the worst that can happen? We're not dead. I think that's the ultimate end point for everyone.
Yeah.
So just whatever is going to lead you forward and not kill you, do it.
Yeah, and I feel like what's really important as well, which I learned through my journey as well, is to listen to your intuition. And I feel like your intuition is always telling you the truth. And if you are on a crossroads and you are not sure what to choose,
Yes.
I think you already know the answer. Your intuition is already telling you.
Correct.
So you just need to understand
Allow
that.
yourself to listen to yourself.
And remember that life is not a competition. You are allowed to change your journey, to take another road if you feel that it is not something that is, making you happy.
True.
And I also realized what helped me to deal with negative feelings and the fears is that it's all part of the life experience. To live through grief, to live through,
A divorce,
trauma
yeah.
and all of this. This is part of what we call human existence, and it's something that makes life better, right?
Yes.
And makes us even more grateful, like you said, for the little things that we have.
No, absolutely. Yeah. I think the biggest thing to move forward in life is to just do it, to appreciate the journey, to find the good in the difficult.
Mm-hmm.
The difficult is not the difficult to cry about it. A tear may teach you a lot of things and allow yourself to be grateful for crying.
Yeah. And if there is something negative that's happening now, maybe it's just another building block to your success.
Yeah, absolutely. It needed to happen for you to move on.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you so much, Sunita,
Your
for such an insightful
Thank
conversation.
you, Tanya. We could go on and on.
Yes,
I really
believe.
appreciate you in my life, and I'm so grateful for you.
Thank you, me too. I really appreciate our years of friendship and your support always. Thank you so much, everyone, for watching, and I hope that this episode gave you the courage that you needed in your life. Good luck, and see you in the next episode. Before we leave, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to my YouTube channel. See you.